The price of avoiding conflict. Have you ever found yourself standing on the edge of a conversation, sensing that something needs to be said, but swallowing your words instead? You feel that tight knot in your stomach. Your mind whispers, "It's not worth it." Stay quiet. Don't make a scene. Just let it go. Be the bigger person. You convince yourself it's a sign of maturity, of wisdom even, that silence is strength, that peace is always better than conflict. But what if I told you that this instinct, this deep-rooted avoidance, might not be as virtuous as it seems? What if I told you that every time you choose silence, every time you avoid confrontation, you are paying a hidden price, a price that accumulates quietly within your soul? We live in a world that venerates comfort and harmony, or at least the appearance of it. From an early age, we are taught that keeping the peace is noble, that being agreeable is good, that conflict is dangerous. We learn these lessons in school when we are told not to talk back to teachers, in our families when we are taught to obey without question, in our workplaces when we are expected to tolerate disrespect for the sake of professionalism, in relationships when we bite our tongues to avoid arguments. We carry these patterns into adulthood, believing that not confronting others is evidence of our emotional intelligence, that maturity means restraint, that letting others cross our boundaries is the price we pay for being kind. But is it truly kindness, or is it fear dressed up as virtue? The 19th century philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche saw through this illusion with piercing clarity. He believed that most of what we call virtue is, in fact, disguised cowardice, a deep fear of confrontation, a terror of losing love, approval, or social acceptance. For Nietzsche, avoiding conflict is not maturity. It is submission. It is a silent betrayal of oneself. He called this the morality of the slave, a system of values crafted by those who were too weak to confront, too powerless to assert themselves, and so they learned to hide behind meekness, politeness, and passivity. This morality does not just exist in history books or abstract philosophy. It shapes the world you live in right now. It whispers in your ear every time you avoid a difficult conversation. It governs your behavior when you remain silent as someone crosses your boundaries. It controls you when you pretend not to care, just to keep the peace. But there is a dark consequence to this way of living. Because every time you suppress your voice, every time you swallow your anger, that energy does not simply vanish. It turns inward. It festers. It grows into resentment, bitterness, and quiet rage. And one day, perhaps unexpectedly, it spills over, sometimes in destructive ways. An explosive argument, a silent withdrawal, a lifetime of unspoken frustrations. This is not peace. It is merely delayed pain, and yet most people continue living this way, trapped in a cycle of silent submission, believing they are doing the right thing. But Nietzsche offers us a radical alternative. He does not suggest we seek conflict for its own sake. He does not promote aggression or domination. Instead, he proposes something far more profound: the courage to face conflict as a necessary condition for personal freedom. Because without confrontation, there can be no boundary. Without boundaries, there can be no true self. Without a self, there is only a hollow existence, shaped and controlled by the expectations of others. Nietzsche understood that conflict, when approached with awareness, is not an enemy. It is a mirror. It reveals who we are, what we value, and what we refuse to tolerate. It is a crucible where our character is forged. To be free, Nietzsche argues, we must stop being afraid of conflict. We must reclaim our will. We must risk discomfort to assert our truth. We must have the courage to endure disapproval, rejection, and even loss if necessary. Because true peace does not arise from avoiding tension. It comes from living in alignment with one's deepest values, unapologetically. In this video, we will dive deeply into Nietzsche's powerful critique of our fear of confrontation. We will explore the origin of the slave morality and how it still governs modern behavior, the hidden poison of resentment that festers beneath the surface of silence, Nietzsche's concept of the will to power and how it offers a path to reclaim your authentic strength. The symbolic transformation from the camel to the lion and finally to the child. A roadmap for personal liberation. And ultimately, why choosing to face conflict is one of the most courageous and life-changing decisions you will ever make. This will not be an easy journey. You will be challenged to confront some uncomfortable truths about yourself, about the world, and about the stories you have been telling yourself your entire life. But if you stay with me, if you open your mind, what you discover here may change how you see conflict forever. Because sometimes freedom is not found in the absence of struggle. Sometimes freedom is born precisely in the act of standing up, speaking out, and refusing to remain silent. Are you ready? Let's begin. Chapter 1. The Slave Morality, Fear Dressed as Virtue. Let us travel back, not just decades or centuries, but to the very foundations of how humans began to understand right and wrong. Imagine a world long before modern laws, before governments, before religious dogmas. A world where strength was survival and power was truth. In that ancient world, there lived the strong, warriors, noblemen, conquerors, those who wielded power without apology. For them, morality was simple. Good was what expressed strength, courage, vitality, ambition. They looked at the world with clear eyes and unflinching will. They seized what they desired. They imposed order through might. They lived in affirmation of life's raw, chaotic energy. They did not apologize for their desires. They did not shrink themselves for fear of judgment. They stood tall, fully present in their own existence. Nietzsche called this the master morality, the morality of the powerful, of those unafraid to assert themselves. To these individuals, being good meant being noble, proud, fearless, creative, bold. But not everyone lived in that space of power. There were others, the many, the weak, the oppressed, the subjugated, those who lacked the physical, political, or emotional strength to confront life directly. For them, power was dangerous. It was a threat. They were too weak to fight back, too powerless to take what they wanted. And so they created a different kind of morality, not through conquest, but through inversion. They flipped the script. Since they could not embody strength, they demonized it. Since they could not dominate, they elevated submission. Since they could not possess, they called desire sinful. Since they could not take, they praised renunciation. Weakness became virtue. Submission became goodness. Humility became holiness. This, Nietzsche called the slave morality, a morality born not from life-affirming power, but from bitter resentment. It is important to understand, slave morality was not born from love or true compassion. It was born as a survival strategy, a way for the powerless to protect themselves psychologically. By redefining good and evil, they could feel morally superior even as they were oppressed. They could say, I am better because I forgive. I am holier because I suffer. I am righteous because I submit. Nietzsche writes in On the Genealogy of Morals, the noble type of man experiences itself as value-creating. It does not need approval. It judges that what is harmful to it is harmful in itself. It knows itself to be that which first accords honor to things. The slave, however, cannot afford such autonomy. The slave needs external validation. The slave needs others to see their submission as goodness because they fear the alternative. Now you may be wondering, interesting history. But how does this apply to me, to us, to the world today? The uncomfortable truth is that this slave morality is not ancient history. It is alive. It is embedded in your upbringing, your culture, your workplace, your relationships. Think about the messages you heard growing up. Don't talk back to your elders. Nice people don't make a fuss. Stay quiet. Don't cause trouble. It's not worth the fight. Be humble. Be agreeable. These ideas sound innocent, even virtuous. But underneath them lies the same fear-driven morality Nietzsche exposed. The fear of conflict, the fear of standing alone, the fear of disapproval. Modern society is saturated with this inversion of values. We praise those who are nice, even when niceness means betraying one's own needs. We admire those who keep the peace, even when that peace is built on silent suffering. We elevate self-sacrifice, even when it is rooted in passive resignation, not true generosity. In corporate environments, employees often tolerate disrespect from superiors to avoid jeopardizing their careers. In marriages, partners suppress their real feelings to prevent arguments. In friendships, people avoid honesty to maintain surface-level harmony. Everywhere, the same pattern plays out: silence over truth, avoidance over confrontation, submission over self-assertion. And here lies the most dangerous illusion. Many people believe that avoiding conflict makes them good, that swallowing pain is a higher form of virtue, that being harmless is the mark of maturity. But Nietzsche would call this self-deception, because what appears as virtue is often fear masquerading as goodness. Fear of being disliked, fear of being rejected, fear of being alone, fear of responsibility. We build narratives to justify this fear. We tell ourselves, I'm being the bigger person. I don't want to sink to their level. I'm taking the high road. But beneath these noble-sounding phrases often lies paralysis, a profound inability to face discomfort head-on. Consider Emily. She works in a demanding corporate office. Her manager frequently belittles her in meetings, dismisses her ideas, takes credit for her work. Each time it happens, Emily feels that knot in her stomach. Her pulse quickens. She knows it is unfair. She wants to speak up, but she does not. She fears losing her job, being seen as difficult, ruining her career. Instead, she tells herself, it's not worth it. I'll just work harder. I'll rise above it. But as the months go by, something changes inside her. She starts to resent not only her boss, but herself. She lies awake at night, replaying every humiliating moment, rehearsing the words she wishes she had spoken. The more she avoids conflict, the more trapped she feels. The more trapped she feels, the more bitter she becomes. This is the silent epidemic Nietzsche saw festering in modern society. The danger of slave morality is not simply that it promotes passivity. Its deeper danger is that it erodes one's very sense of self. When you live your life suppressing your real emotions, desires, and convictions to avoid conflict, you slowly disconnect from who you are. You become dependent on external approval. You lose the ability to set boundaries. You confuse peace with numbness. In time, you may even forget what your real values are, because you have spent so long accommodating everyone else's expectations. Nietzsche warns that such a life is not a life fully lived. It is a half-life, an existence of quiet resignation. I want you to reflect for a moment. How many times have you remained silent when you knew you should have spoken up? How often have you allowed others to cross your boundaries to keep the peace? How many times have you dressed up your fear of conflict as virtue? Be honest. Because the truth is, every act of avoidance is not neutral. It is not harmless. Each time you betray your own truth to appease others, you teach the world how to treat you. You train others to disrespect your boundaries. You participate, however, unwillingly, in your own domination. Now, Nietzsche was not a cruel advocate of endless fighting. He did not propose we become combative, aggressive, or needlessly confrontational. His message was far more profound. To live authentically, you must reclaim your will. You must dare to face conflict when necessary. You must risk disapproval to protect your integrity. You must refuse to sacrifice your soul for the appearance of harmony. Because true virtue is not found in passive submission. It is found in conscious strength. It is found in the courage to say, I will not surrender my truth to avoid your discomfort. But what happens when you do not? What happens when you continue to avoid conflict, suppress your anger, and bottle your frustration year after year? The answer is one of Nietzsche's most penetrating insights: the rise of resentment. A poisonous force that slowly consumes the soul from within. A force that transforms avoidance into bitterness and silence into quiet rage. In the next chapter, we will explore the dark inner workings of resentment and why it may already be shaping far more of your life than you realize. Stay with me, Because once you understand this hidden poison, you will see your entire life and the world around you through new eyes. Chapter 2: Resentment, the hidden poison within. We have seen how Nietzsche described the slave morality, a system born out of weakness, built upon the avoidance of conflict and disguised as virtue. But this is only the beginning of the artist's illness. Because when you suppress your will long enough, when you avoid conflict repeatedly to maintain the illusion of peace, something begins to grow inside you, slowly, silently, poisonously. Nietzsche calls it resentment, a word that cannot simply be translated into the English resentment, though that comes close. It is not just a fleeting feeling of anger. It is a spiritual disease, a chronic condition, a slow-burning bitterness that eats away at your soul. Imagine someone like Daniel. Daniel has always been known as the nice guy. At work, he volunteers for extra projects no one else wants. He stays late. He never complains when others dump their work on him. Even when his boss takes credit for his ideas, Daniel smiles and says nothing. In his friendships, Daniel rarely voices his true feelings. When friends cancel plans at the last minute, when they mock him, or when they take advantage of his generosity, Daniel brushes it off. He tells himself, "It's okay, I'm above all this." In his romantic relationships, Daniel avoids disagreements. He's terrified of conflict, convinced that expressing his needs might push his partner away. Instead, he compromises, again and again, until his own desires disappear entirely. To the outside world, Daniel seems virtuous, patient, selfless, kind. But inside Daniel, a different story brews. Late at night, when no one is watching, Daniel's mind replays every moment of humiliation, every time he was slighted, every time he was dismissed. And each time the bitterness grows a little stronger. He starts to think, "They don't appreciate me. They take advantage of my kindness. I always give and receive nothing." His resentment does not explode outward, at least, not yet. Instead, it ferments quietly beneath the surface. This is resentment, the poison of unexpressed will. Nietzsche understood that resentment arises when the natural impulse to act, to defend oneself, to assert one's will, to speak one's truth is blocked. But the energy of that impulse does not simply disappear. Energy cannot be destroyed. It transforms. And when it cannot move outward as action, it turns inward as poison. The person who is full of resentment is not simply a victim. They are, as Nietzsche says, a co-conspirator in their own imprisonment. By continually choosing avoidance, by refusing to confront others when wronged, by pretending that their silence is a sign of moral superiority, they create the very bitterness that eventually consumes them. The weak, Nietzsche writes, find in revenge the compensation for their impotence. It is they who invented evil, their hate distilled into a system. Let's take another example. Maria is a mother of two. For years, she sacrificed her personal dreams for her family. She abandoned her career to care for her children. She catered to her husband's every need. She told herself, "This is what good mothers do. This is love." And yet, when her sacrifices go unrecognized, when no one thanks her, when her children grow distant, when her husband becomes emotionally unavailable, something inside her shifts. Maria becomes bitter. She begins to criticize her family subtly, with passive-aggressive remarks. She begins to see herself as the long-suffering martyr. In her mind, she paints herself as morally superior because of all she has endured in silence. But beneath that image of selfless virtue lies her repressed anger, her resentment. She tells herself she is loving, but what she feels is closer to quiet hatred. This is the trap of resentment. It allows us to feel morally superior while harboring bitterness. Instead of confronting the world and risking conflict, we retreat into victimhood. We wear our suffering as a badge of righteousness. We say, "Look at all I've endured. Look at how good I am." But Nietzsche exposes this as a form of spiritual cowardice. The resentful person does not take responsibility for their own imprisonment. They blame others for their unhappiness, all while refusing to change their patterns. They become addicted to their own misery, and this pattern plays out not just in individuals, but in entire cultures. Whole societies can become trapped in resentment. Movements built on victimhood often frame their grievances as moral superiority. Rather than seeking empowerment, they cultivate endless grievances, blaming external forces for all their dissatisfaction, while avoiding the uncomfortable work of self-transformation. Nietzsche warns that slave morality, when combined with resentment, can dominate entire civilizations, creating cultures addicted to their own sense of persecution. And here is the most painful part. Resentment often feels good. It allows us to feel important without taking risk. It provides a sense of purpose, even as it corrodes us from within. It says, I suffer, therefore I am good. I am the victim, therefore I am noble. I am oppressed, therefore I am justified in my bitterness. But make no mistake, resentment does not heal. It never empowers. It only deepens the wound. Ask yourself honestly, have you ever felt secretly pleased by your own suffering? Have you ever resented people for not recognizing your sacrifices? Have you ever allowed silent bitterness to replace open, honest confrontation? Be truthful, because it is only through honest self-examination that we can break this cycle. Nietzsche does not leave us in despair. He offers a way out, but it requires profound courage. To escape resentment, you must reclaim your power. You must stop defining yourself by your wounds. You must stop avoiding conflict. Instead of quietly resenting others for crossing your boundaries, you must build boundaries. Instead of silently suffering unmet expectations, you must express your needs. Instead of playing the role of the moral martyr, you must risk being seen as assertive, even aggressive if necessary. Because only through confrontation does the poison dissipate. Only through action does your will find expression. But where does the strength to do this come from? Nietzsche calls it the will to power. Not a hunger for domination, but a profound life force. The drive to affirm yourself, to create, to overcome, to fully inhabit your own existence. In the next chapter, we will explore this concept, the embody antidote to resentment, the engine of personal transformation. If you have felt trapped by resentment, if you have carried silent bitterness for years, the will to power is your escape. Stay with me. We are only just beginning to uncover what freedom truly demands. Chapter 3, Will to Power, the Antidote to Submission. We have seen how Nietzsche exposes the origin of our fear of conflict. We have witnessed the quiet poison of resentment fermenting inside those who avoid confrontation. But now we reach the heart of his philosophy, the solution, the antidote, the force that can break the chains of submission and bitterness. Nietzsche calls it the will to power. Of all Nietzsche's ideas, none has been more misunderstood. Many people hear will to power and imagine brutal domination, the strong crushing the weak, the powerful seeking control over others. But this is a shallow distortion. Nietzsche's will to power is not about tyranny. It is not about oppressing others. It is something far more profound, more personal, more existential. At its core, the will to power is the fundamental drive of life itself. Every living being carries within it an innate impulse to grow, to assert, to create, to overcome obstacles, to express its unique existence. From the smallest plant pushing through concrete, to the child exploring the world, to the artist bringing a vision into reality, this is the will to power. Consider a tiny seed buried beneath the soil. It faces darkness, pressure, and resistance from the earth above. But within that seed is a force, silent but relentless, driving it upward toward the light. That force does not ask for permission. It does not negotiate with the dirt. It simply asserts itself. This is not aggression. This is not cruelty. This is life affirming itself. And so it is with human beings. We are meant to expand, to evolve, to become who we are, not through passive avoidance, but through conscious self-assertion. But what happens when the will to power is suppressed? What happens when, like those governed by slave morality, we convince ourselves that asserting our will is dangerous or wrong? The will to power does not disappear. It does not die. Instead, it turns inward and mutates. And here is the most dangerous truth. Suppressed will to power fuels resentment. Every time you suppress your voice to avoid conflict, every time you betray your own desires to please others, every time you shrink yourself to fit someone else's expectations, you distort your will to power. You transform life's most vital force into frustration, bitterness, self-pity. You become like a caged animal, still powerful but pacing endlessly, frustrated, unable to act. Take Michael, for example. Michael has spent his entire adult life as the nice guy. He never speaks up in meetings, afraid to challenge his superiors. He tolerates disrespect in his marriage, believing that being accommodating will save the relationship. He sacrifices his dreams to maintain harmony. But beneath his polite exterior, Michael is angry. He resents his boss. He resents his spouse. He resents his life. Yet he still tells himself that he is being good. This is not virtue. This is corrupted will to power. The truth Nietzsche demands we face is this: to live fully, we must reclaim our will to power. This does not mean becoming cruel or selfish. It means owning your desires without shame, setting boundaries unapologetically, facing conflict with courage rather than avoidance, choosing growth over comfort, speaking truth even when it risks disapproval. Reclaiming the will to power is reclaiming your right to exist fully. But how do we do this? Nietzsche would not offer simple formulas, but he gives us principles that require both courage and patience. Let us explore them. Step 1. Recognize that fear of conflict is not virtue. First, you must dismantle the lie that avoiding conflict makes you noble. Every time you avoid confrontation to keep the peace, ask yourself, am I truly being wise, or am I simply afraid? Honest self-inquiry is where transformation begins. Step 2. Start small. Practice saying no. If you have spent years saying yes out of fear, practice small acts of self-assertion. Decline a request that drains you. Disagree politely, but firmly in a conversation. Express your honest preference when others expect compliance. Every small act strengthens your will to power. Step 3. Set clear boundaries. Boundaries are not aggression. They are declarations of self-respect. Define what you will and will not tolerate. Communicate your limits clearly. Enforce those boundaries even if it risks discomfort. Each boundary you establish reinforces your sense of sovereignty. Step 4. Accept the cost of authenticity. You will lose some people when you begin asserting yourself. Some will call you selfish. Some will try to shame you back into submission. This is the price of freedom. As Nietzsche writes, you must be ready to burn yourself in your own flame. How could you rise anew if you have not first become ashes? Nietzsche. 5. Embrace conflict as a catalyst, not a catastrophe. Conflict is not your enemy. When handled with consciousness, conflict reveals who respects your boundaries, who fears your growth, who is worth keeping close. It purifies your relationships and clarifies your values. Understand this: life itself is conflict. Every breath you take is a struggle between your body and the world. Every choice you make asserts one possibility and rejects infinite others. To live fully is to stand in the center of this tension, not to flee from it. Nietzsche writes, "The higher we soar, the smaller we appear to those who cannot fly. Your growth will unsettle those committed to their own stagnation. Do not shrink to make them comfortable." The will to power is not about dominating others. It is about refusing to let fear dominate you. It is the refusal to betray your own soul for the illusion of safety. It is the courage to say, I choose to live as who I am, not who others expect me to be. But Nietzsche takes us even further. Reclaiming the will to power is only the beginning. There is a deeper metamorphosis, a profound evolution of the human spirit. Nietzsche describes this transformation through one of his most powerful metaphors: the three metamorphoses of the spirit. the camel, the lion, and the child. In the next chapter, we will journey through these stages, from burdened submission to courageous defiance to creative rebirth. You will discover how to stop being the beast of burden, how to conquer the inner dragon, and how to finally become the creator of your own values. Stay with me, because true freedom lies beyond even the will to power. It lies in the rebirth of your spirit. Chapter 4: The Three Metamorphoses of the Spirit. Up to now, we have explored Nietzsche's brutal diagnosis of modern life. How we hide behind slave morality, avoid conflict, suppress our desires, and feed a slow-burning resentment that poisons the soul. And yet, for Nietzsche, philosophy is not merely about exposing sickness, but about offering a path of overcoming, a path toward personal freedom, a path toward becoming fully alive. That path, Nietzsche tells us, is not simple. It requires inner transformation, a profound metamorphosis of the spirit itself. In Thus Spoke Zarathustra, he gives us one of the most beautiful metaphors in all of philosophy: the three metamorphoses of the spirit. These stages are not theoretical. They are deeply psychological, mapping the painful but liberating journey every person must undertake if they wish to live authentically. Three metamorphoses of the spirit I name for you. How? The spirit becomes a camel, and the camel a lion, and the lion finally a child. Let us now journey deeply into each metamorphosis. This is not simply Nietzsche's path, it is your path. The camel, the burden bearer. The first stage is familiar to most of us. The camel symbolizes the spirit that carries the weight of the world's expectations. It bows under loads it never chose but was taught to accept. From early childhood, you are taught: obey your parents, respect authority without question, don't rock the boat, suppress your anger, sacrifice your dreams for duty. Society loves camels. Camels keep families stable. They make good employees, good citizens, good partners. They endure quietly, they suffer nobly, they never rebel. The camel believes that life is meant to be endured, that virtue lies in silent suffering. Consider Andrew. Andrew works tirelessly at a job he despises because it provides for his family. He suppresses his own ambitions to maintain stability. When friends disrespect him, he smiles and avoids confrontation. When his partner criticizes him, he stays silent to keep the peace. He has learned that saying yes to everyone is what makes him good. Andrew has become a master of enduring, but deep inside he feels heavy, lifeless, disconnected from himself. Nietzsche respected the camel's strength but saw its tragedy. The camel has been trained to believe that its worth lies in submission. It accepts burdens out of fear, not freedom. And yet, in every camel, there lies a seed of rebellion. There comes a day when the camel can no longer bear the weight, when the soul whispers, enough. 2. The lion, the roar of defiance. When the camel collapses under its burdens, a transformation occurs. The spirit becomes the lion. The lion awakens with one essential task: to say no, to impose duties, inherited guilt, rules that suffocate. The soul, endless self-sacrifice. This stage is fierce because it must confront the great dragon. Thou shalt. The dragon shines with golden scales. On every scale glitters a commandment. Thou shalt obey. Thou shalt be humble. Thou shalt avoid conflict. Thou shalt suppress your will. The lion faces the dragon and dares to say, I will. Not I obey, but I will. Think of Lisa. Lisa spent years as a quiet people pleaser. She avoided every conflict, absorbed every criticism, played the role everyone expected. But one day, after a final betrayal by her partner, something snapped. For the first time, Lisa stood her ground. She demanded respect. She drew boundaries. She walked away from toxic relationships. She risked being called selfish. In that moment, Lisa became the lion. Nietzsche's caution: the lion's strength is necessary, but it is still incomplete. It is reactionary. The lion defines itself by what it rejects, not yet by what it creates. Rebellion, while powerful, is not freedom. It is the doorway to freedom. The child, the spirit of creative freedom. Nietzsche's final stage is the most mysterious and the most beautiful. The lion, having destroyed the old commandments, must now evolve into the child. The child is not burdened by duty. It is not trapped by rebellion. It simply creates. The child symbolizes innocence, playfulness, spontaneity, creativity, and joyful self-expression. The child lives in a world of possibilities, not rules. The child says, not I must or I rebel, but simply, I choose. It creates new values. It writes its own story. Where the camel submitted and the lion resisted, the child dances. Imagine David. David spent years trapped in submission, then years lost in anger, breaking free from family expectations. But now, having faced his dragons, he wakes each day with lightness. He no longer feels compelled to prove himself. He pursues his passions, not to impress, but because they give him joy. He speaks his truth, not to dominate, but to express. He creates, not from rebellion, but from love of life itself. David lives as the child. Nietzsche writes, the child is innocence and forgetting, a new beginning, a game, a self-propelled wheel, a first movement, a sacred yes. The child embodies pure affirmation, a life no longer defined by others or by rebellion, but by authentic being. Ask yourself honestly, where am I in this journey? Am I the camel, dutiful, burdened, silently enduring? Am I the lion, fiercely breaking free, but still reactive? Or am I the child, creating my own path at peace with who I am? Each stage is painful. Each requires courage. Each demands sacrifice. But only the child knows true freedom. Understand, this metamorphosis is not easy. The camel must surrender comfort. The lion must risk isolation. The child must embrace uncertainty. Most people never leave the camel. Many get stuck as lions, forever fighting. Few have the courage to become children, creators of their own existence. Nietzsche's path is not for the faint-hearted. It requires you to kill your inherited gods, face your deepest fears, and stand alone in the terrifying freedom of creation. But once you cross that threshold, life becomes not a burden to endure nor a battle to fight, but a playground of possibilities. Yet even here, one final danger remains. Even after transforming into the child, many still fall back into the old habit, silence. The silent refusal to act. The silent avoidance of conflict. In our final chapter, we will confront this last temptation, the high price of silence, and the courage it takes to finally speak. Because freedom is not simply becoming who you are, it is the daily act of standing in that truth, even when it costs you everything. Stay with me. The final truth is waiting. Chapter 5. Conclusion. The courage to face conflict. And now we have arrived at the final truth. We began with the simple question, why are we so afraid of conflict? And along the way, we have peeled back the many layers of that fear, uncertainty, weight of slave morality, the hidden poison of resentment, the suppression of the will to power, the painful yet liberating metamorphoses of the spirit. But now we confront one last lingering enemy, silence. Silence may feel safe, it may feel wise, it may even feel noble. You tell yourself, I'm being the bigger person. It's not worth the fight. I don't want to hurt anyone. Nothing will change anyway. But Nietzsche saw what most people refuse to see. Silence is not neutrality. Silence in the face of injustice, disrespect, or the violation of your boundaries is itself an act of submission. Every time you remain silent when you should speak, you reinforce the very power structures that oppress you. You teach the world how to treat you. You show others where your limits truly are, or where they are not. Consider Kevin. For years, Kevin avoided every conflict at work. When his manager dumped extra work on him, he said nothing. When colleagues took credit for his ideas, he remained polite. When clients disrespected him, he smiled and apologized. And yet, Kevin's career never advanced. His mental health deteriorated. His resentment grew. He kept telling himself, "I'm just trying to avoid drama. I'm being professional. It's not worth the fight." But in truth, Kevin wasn't avoiding drama. He was avoiding responsibility for his own dignity. His silence was not maturity, it was fear. Nietzsche writes, "He who cannot put his will into things remains forever a slave." Silence may protect you from immediate discomfort, but over time, it destroys your integrity, because life will always confront you with moments where you must choose complicity or courage, comfort or truth, pleasing others or honoring yourself. True freedom is not the absence of fear. It is the courage to act despite fear. It is not the absence of conflict. It is the willingness to engage in necessary conflict to defend what matters most. Conflict, when rooted in integrity, is not destructive. It is creative. It is where your true self takes shape, where you make your values visible, where you declare, "This is who I am." And so, I leave you with a question. The next time you feel the urge to remain silent, ask yourself honestly, am I being wise, or am I simply being cowardly? If you answer this question truthfully, it may change your life. You were not born to carry the burdens of others endlessly like the camel. You were not born to spend your life locked in endless rebellion like the lion. Within you is the child, the free creator, the joyful soul, the one who writes new values, who plays with existence, who lives fully. But to become that child, you must first pass through conflict. You must have the courage to say, "No more. This is where I stand. This is who I am." If any part of this journey spoke to you, I invite you to take your first step right now. Write these words. I choose to no longer remain silent. Say it. Write it. Own it. Because putting truth into words is the first act of reclaiming your will. And do not stop here. The journey of becoming who you are is not finished. It never is. Stay with me as we continue to explore the hidden truths that shape your life and how to finally break free.